My name is Andrea Sunme-Jones, and I will be the chair of this evening's discussion. We would like to thank our sponsors, the Center for the Study of Religion, the Council of the Humanities, Departments of Comparative Literature, English, French and Italian, Philosophy and Religion, Dollars and Sins, Graduate School, Program in European Cultural Studies, and the University Center for Human Values. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Michael Wood. Professor Wood is Charles Barnwell's Strott Class of 1923 professor and professor of comparative literature. His work is on 20th century literature, literary theory, and history of criticism. His latest book is on the significances of oracles, and his forthcoming books are about Marcel Proust and about literature and knowledge. Please give Professor Wood a warm welcome as he leads off this evening's discussion with our two guests, Alain Badiou and Cornel West.
Okay, welcome to this conversation on the subject of liberty, personal liberty and collective equality, and their conceivably inseparable nature between Alain Badiou and Cornel West. I'm not going to take up a great deal of your time, but I would like to offer two brief introductions. First, to Alain Badiou. Alain Badiou is one of the foremost, if not the foremost, contemporary French philosopher. He's the subject of a recent book of essays by our friend and colleague, Gabriel Riera. He's a novelist as well as a philosopher, and he's himself an example of what he identifies as a trend in recent French philosophy of the second half of the 20th century. That is, in his words, in the words of an essay, a recent essay in the New Left Review, the result of an effort to shift the frontiers between philosophy and literature. He's doing this both by writing novels and by writing philosophy, which takes literature into account in a way in which philosophy, it would not be an exaggeration to say, does not always do. Alain Badiou is the author of many books and articles. I shall name a few. I shall name L'être et l'événement, Being and the Event. You'll notice the play on another famous book, which has L'être as the first part of its title. Being and Nothingness. He's the author of Conditions, Conditions, 1992, author of a book on Gilles Deleuze. He's the author of books on ethics, on St. Paul, and has done a good deal of writing about Samuel Beckett. In one of his essays on Samuel Beckett, Alain Badiou describes how he came to Beckett in the 1950s when he was a young man, and describes it, one of the attributes of youth is that youth, young people, want to change the world. He says, it seems the least one could do. Actually, I'm sorry to say, there are a lot of people who do not wish to do even that least, have no desire to change the world at all. But of course, what it is that young people want to do is, even in that formulation, is want to change the world. It does indeed seem to me the least one could do, but of course changing the world is a rather different enterprise, and that might perhaps be the most we could do, but we shall get a little closer to it by listening to people like Alain Badiou and Cornel West. Now, there is something inherently absurd about introducing Cornel West in Princeton, or perhaps indeed anywhere. Absurd in the sense it would be absurd to introduce two old friends to each other not knowing they were already old friends. Or absurd perhaps in the way jazz musicians like to joke about, the form of the joke standard with Dizzy Gillespie and other jazz musicians, in which the musician, the leader of the band, steps to the front of the stage and says, I'd like to introduce the band. We wait for him to introduce the people, saying, this is, Billy Joe James on drum, and this is so, but he turns around and introduces the members of the band to each other. Frank, this is Joe, this is Fred, this is this is what it feels like to introduce Cornel West. However, the fact that it's absurd is not a reason for not doing it, and I shall continue. I shall simply mention, again, a few of Cornell's extraordinary books. The American Evasion of Philosophy, 1991. Ethical Dimensions of Marxist Thought, 1991. Race Matters, 1993, and Democracy Matters, 2004, with their wonderful double meanings. Race does matter, democracy does matter, and these are matters of race, and these are matters of democracy. And finally, about Cornell, I would like to say he's the only person I know with whom you can have a conversation, a fairly ordinary conversation about health along the lines of how are you today, and end up with a conversation about Matthew Arnold and Empedocles on Etna. It's not every day you get from an ordinary conversation about health to volcanoes and philosophers and sacrifice, and Cornell gets you there without any kind of, with lightness and charm and wit and a great deal of surprise. So please welcome both of these extraordinary thinkers, Alain Badiou and Cornel.
Not disaster with water. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, with Andreas Woodme-Jones, with Michael Wood, and with Cornel West. It's really for me an event. An event for me is something which happens and which produces a new situation. A new truth is a new situation. An event creates the light of a relationship between two things which were, before the event, strongly separated. Today, these two things are Cornel and me. How many differences? Cornel perfectly knows all the great traditions of Western philosophy, from Socrates to contemporary philosophers. Me, for example. But his proper creation is in the descendancy of the best of the democratic American tradition. Melville, Emerson, James, Baldwin, Dewey, Coltrane, Martin Luther King, and so on. On my side, I know and I admire this tradition, but my proper creation is in the descendancy of the revolutionary French tradition. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Saint-Just, Arthur Rimbaud, André Breton, André Malraux, Sartre, Althusser. Cornel, as you know, is a religious man, as near everybody in your country. I am not, as near everybody in mine. Cornel mistrusts the power of scientific knowledge and abstract rationality. I am a mathematician in the descendancy of Descartes, and so on. For example, maybe some of you have noticed that Cornel is a bit black and I am a bit white. But today, we are in the same fight, in the same vision, in the same search for a new trend in ethical and political framework. We are, I think, a living proof of the potency of philosophy, of its universality, with completely different origins, references,